going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the NLL Flash. 2 weeks in a row? Who are we? Yeah, right. We're so back, baby. And we are here to get you set for week 17 in the National Lacrosse League. What's going on? My name's Tino Fera, your host, as always. And man, we had just a handful of unreal games last weekend, and it led into the trade deadline, which was a little bit underwhelming, to put it softly. So I guess I'll just go through the small list of trades here while we're talking about it. And then forewarning as well, we don't have a flash game of the week this coming weekend, just with a full slate of 8 games. And with the trade deadline just passing here, I kind of just wanted to have a guest on to help me go through the trade deadline and go through the games as a whole here. So you'll find out who the guest is shortly here, or I guess you already know because of the title of the show. But yeah, no flash game of the week here, so no vote, but a full slate of 8 games that we'll get into shortly. But let's get into the trade deadline here, shall we? So just going down in chronological order here, as per usual. The Saskatchewan Rush acquire forward Reese Dutch from the Colorado Mammoth for a conditional second-round pick in the 2023 entry draft. The Mammoth then acquired defenseman Garrett McIntosh from the Vegas Desert Dogs for a conditional second-round draft pick in the 25 entry draft. And finally, that's right, finally, because there were only 3 moves on the trade deadline, we were all scrolling through Twitter, refreshing like crazy for just 3 moves. So thanks, guys. Maybe let's do something a little bit more exciting next season. The Philadelphia Wings acquired defenseman Liam Burns from Panther City for a second-round pick in the 2023 entry draft. And that's it. That's it for the trade deadline. So let's get you set now for week 17. All right, time now to welcome in our special guest for the episode. Not here this time to preview a game of the week, because as we already mentioned, we're not going through our flash game of the week for this episode. We are here to go through the remainder of the games with said special guest, because there's no brighter mind in the world of lacrosse. And we haven't talked to him since the preseason. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ty Merrow of Lacrosse Flash. Ty, I know you got a busy schedule, so thank you for making time for us. We have not had a chance to talk to you since, well, months ago, realistically. How has the season been treating you so far?
What's up, Tino? First off, you could definitely find some brighter minds than mine out there. As far as how the season's gone, it's been busy. The stats project that I've been doing has been time intensive. Let's put it that way. I've been having to carve out some time here and there just for the personal life, just to make sure that the ball and chain doesn't get too upset with me that I'm in my room all day just scoring lacrosse games. Other than that, man, it's all good. Been learning some really cool stuff from that, and just it's been the on-floor product for the NLL is unparalleled.
We love that. All right, well, let's get into the episode here. Before we start to break down the bulk of the games here, I just want to quickly ask you off the top, regarding the trade deadline. I know only 3 teams really made moves, but do you have an opinion of a team or teams that you think won the trade deadline versus lost the trade deadline? It can be a team that didn't make a move, like maybe someone who didn't make a move won or lost the trade deadline in itself. But yeah, do you think there's a winner or loser from the trade deadline?
Yeah, there are a lot of losers from the trade deadline. There's one quote-unquote winner, and I would say it's Paul Day in the Philadelphia Wings, just because he actually made his team better. Colorado got rid of an asset they didn't really need, got a little bit something back for it, but they also had to give up a little bit of something when they had to Garrett McIntosh, which made their defense better. I think if Ryan Lee's back long-term, that's going to help them out a lot. But as far as going out there and trying to actually bolster both ends of the floor, Paul Day is the only one that's done that in the entire NLL. And way too many teams, I don't think too many teams set pat, just because I kind of have an idea of some of the asking prices for some of the players that were available, and obscene is the polite way of putting it. I think the real losers are just us for having compensatory picks and everyone overvaluing everything. And just the trade deadline was once again just a giant whiff, and everybody's a loser for it except for Paul Day and the Philadelphia Wings.
So the Philadelphia Wings have won the trade deadline, and everybody else, including us in the media, have lost the trade deadline. Good to know. Okay, let's start going down these games of the weekend. There's 8 total, which means every team is playing and one team is playing twice. So let's just go down in chronological order here. So Friday night, the lone game on Friday, we have the 9-2 San Diego Seals taking on the 8-5 Lacrosse Club from Panther City. That's at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern at Dickies Arena. And, we just talked about Paul Day and making moves here. And one of the moves that he was making, or the only move, I guess, that he made, regards Liam Burns, who is now a member of the Philadelphia Wings, leaving Panther City. So I want to know, in your opinion, how much of a loss is Liam Burns to Panther City?
I think you have to look at Burns' departure from the team in similar light as Chad Cummings' departure earlier in the season when Panther City acquired Jake Fox. Because Cummings is a good defender. And Liam Burns is a good defender. Honestly, that move shocked me a little bit just because I think he's one of their better defenders. He's incredibly aggressive on ball. He's smart as hell off ball. Like, that dude just knows when to slide. And I wonder, Panther City's defense has been a strength this entire season, especially with the stellar play of Nick Damude between the pipes and just how solid he's been. So they could kind of afford to lose Chad Cummings. And I know he was trying to get back out east. I have a feeling Burns was trying to do the same thing. The guys in my neck of the woods. And that Western travel, man, that's a nightmare out of Atlanta. So I do think that probably factored into it. Philadelphia and the Eastern Seaboard is a lot easier to get to from Atlanta instead of, trying to go from here to sunny San Diego. So getting back to the point, though, I do think there's a level of depth I think they're starting to plumb into from their defensive side of things that might start showing up, might negatively start affecting them. As good as Nick Damude has been, as good as that defense is, you can't keep shedding assets like that, especially when you're in the thick of a playoff race, especially assets that are as good as Liam Burns, and not have that kind of bite you in the butt somewhere down the line.
Yeah, that's one of those moves that shocked me a little bit. Liam Burns, before he left the team, was second on the team for caused turnovers with 13 and 7th on the team for loose balls with 52. So we'll see how that one plays out for Panther City going forward. But let's move on to the next game in line here. Saturday, the 10-4 Toronto Rock will be taking on the 2-10 Albany Firewolves at MVP Arena. That's at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And it's not a stretch to say that this has been a tough sledding kind of season for Albany. Basically from, I think, week 2 or maybe even just week 1 onward, they lost Joe Nardella with a season-ending injury. Now Kieran McCardle finds himself on the injured list, plus just a handful of lackluster performances throughout the season so far. So with 6 games remaining now, 5 of which are against teams that are either in a playoff spot or at least fighting for a playoff spot, if you're Albany, if you're Glenn Clark here, how are you approaching this game?
That's a good question. Give yourself a ding. I don't really have a good answer for you outside of just going out there and competing. They've played better of late. Like, Doug Jamieson has been very solid between the pipes, considering like he had that little bit of a rough stretch there when we were speculating he was going to get traded to San Diego, and then he started turning it on, and it's like, okay, well, this is like him auditioning for other teams. But I think he's back in Dougie form, which is good. You kind of touched on it earlier, though. This team has not had their consistent lineup. McCardle's out now. Walker was out for a minute there. Connor Kelly was out for a minute there. Like, they haven't had Charlie Kitchen for the season. They're really not putting out their full lineup. And just considering the losing streak they're on, the talent that they're about to be facing and everything, they can go out and win a game. They can go out and upset someone. Someone's going to go in there being like, trap game. Nah, not us. And then going to find themselves with an L after that contest. But that's pretty much it. Just you got to go out there and compete. Clark's smart. That entire coaching staff is smart as hell, and they've got good players on the team. But there's only so much you can do, which I think they're kind of seeing. And I just think it's one of those. They're in the middle of they're in the middle of reaping what they sowed over the offseason when they did the entire just shuffling out of their offense.
All right, next up on Saturday, we have this is probably my favorite matchup of the whole week, and I'm so excited for this game. The 6-7 Halifax Thunderbirds looking to take on the 6-7 Philadelphia Wings in Philly at the Wells Fargo Center. That's at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, and just a massive game that might come down to just two goaltenders. And two very similar teams, in my opinion. Halifax is a team that on one night can just dominate any team in this league, and then on another night can put up a pretty average performance. Philly, on the other hand, again, pretty similar, and they're a team that I just keep thinking about how much better of a position they'd be in if they hadn't dropped those games earlier in the season or a couple of weeks ago, really, to Georgia and the Riptide. Given all that information, are you surprised that Halifax didn't make a move at the trade deadline?
Not really. I don't think they needed to. I think they needed to tinker with their roster in a way, just because it was a lot of smart but slow on that left side. They didn't really, outside of Uncle Frank, Eric Vanel, they didn't really have a lot of bodies out there crashing and banging, getting up that space that they needed. I think Dawson Theed in that lineup just makes a whole ton of sense. They have a bit of a surplus over on the right side, so maybe they could have shipped an asset there. But at the end of the day, they got a good team. They don't really need to do any selling, just unless you're trying to build it for the future. But again, maybe asking prices were a little too high. So a little surprised they didn't do anything. But again, they're in good shape. They have a really strong offense. Warren Hill's been playing phenomenal of late, especially when you got Graham Hossack and Jake Withers out in front of you, along with the entire defensive roster of just stalwart badasses. Like, you don't really need to mess with that. Eventually it's going to figure itself out. And after last week, I think they're on the right path forward, especially coming up against Philly that, as you noted, yeah, they're better. They've made additions out the front and back door, but there's been a level of inconsistency even after acquiring Mitch Jones. Yeah, the offense has been better, but then it sometimes has some issues. The defense and Zach Higgins have been kind of a little hit or miss every now and then. So if they can get some consistency, yeah, maybe that'll help. But roundabout way is saying, nah, I don't think the Thunderbirds need to do anything.
Next up on the list, we have the 3-8 Georgia Swarm heading on down to the Nassau Coliseum to take on the 4-9 New York Riptide. That's at 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern. And the Riptide, don't call it a win streak yet. They find themselves the winners of 2 straight since Cam Dunkerley has rejoined the team, with one of those wins coming against that hungry Philly team that we were just talking about. Ty, is New York close to figuring this out, or do you still think they have some growing pains that they have to go through here?
There are still some growing pains. I don't think it's any shock to anyone that they're still not quite there. And they've also gone through some injuries too. But I don't think it's like they're close to figuring it out. Everybody knows what the solution is. You have to get consistent goaltending. They haven't had that all season. Steve Orleman is having a really rough sophomore slump. There's no two ways around it. Kevin Orleman, unfortunately, was injured again. Go Abrams ain't it. They should have kept Cam Dunkerley on the roster earlier in the season. Like, that was kind of baffling when they let him go the first time. Good for them for bringing him back, as dude's proven. It's 3 games. This is a really small sample size, but he's undefeated in the NLL every game he starts, and they've got 2 wins off of that. I think that's been the solution. I think everybody knows that's the solution, and it's just proof that they needed consistent goaltending. They don't need a world beater. They don't need a Matt Vince. They don't need a Christian Del Bianco out there, but they need someone solid that's making those stops that weren't being made earlier in the season. And as a result, they've got 2 wins in a row, which hasn't happened in quite some time.
All right, game. I think this is number 4 on the list here, but either way, Saturday we have the 9-4 Calgary Roughnecks, the rematch from last weekend, taking on the 5-7 Saskatchewan Rush. That's at 6:30 Pacific, 9:30 Eastern at the SaskTel Center this time. Holy, how about that crowd in Calgary last weekend? Oh my goodness,
so good.
Oh, unbelievable. But talking about the Rush here, in 5 of their last 6 games, they've managed 4 or less goals through 2 quarters of play. Is there something specific that you're seeing that's causing some of their slower starts?
Not really that I can think of. I think there are some issues that are kind of like compounding together and resulting in the record that they've had over their last couple of games. Marty Densdale's missed the last 3. Their offense is really missing him out there and all the dirty work that he does for everyone. The veterans aren't really producing. Like Keenan's either hit or miss. Lintner, Matthews, the other guy whose name I can't remember off the top of my head. That's a great sign, Ty. Yeah, good game prep. Anyways, no, it's like they're not doing as well as they should. Like Matthews only had 4 points, I think, combined over his last 2 games, which is it's Mark Matthews. 4 is like a half for him. So I do think there's been an issue there, but their power play has really fallen back down to earth. And I think when you just kind of combine all of those things together, it's one of those, if you're not you're expecting your veterans to lead by example, but if they're not having success and then your team as a whole isn't having success on the power play, which is supposed to be your bread and butter and very much was at the beginning of the year when you started off a lot better than you played the last couple of games, it turns into a 4-game losing streak, which is unprecedented for this team since moving to Saskatchewan.
All right, next up here, also on Saturday, we have no Sunday lacrosse this weekend. What's up with that? Yeah, boo. So next up on Saturday, we have the 10-3 Buffalo Bandits heading on down to Pechanga Arena to take on San Diego, who will either be 10-2 at this point or 9-3, depending on how their matchup earlier in the weekend goes. So that's a 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, as before mentioned, there at the Pechanga Arena. And this is a super intriguing matchup for several reasons. 2 of the top teams in the league. Obviously, Buffalo wants to get rid of the sour taste in their mouth from last week's loss to Colorado. But for San Diego, playing in their second game of the weekend, depending on some of the results elsewhere throughout the league, they could find themselves sitting in first place in the league overall. So how do the Seals find success against Buffalo?
Well, first things first, I think they have to wear just the ugliest sweaters out there, and ugly in a good way. I am a big fan of this Godzilla.
You like the Godzilla, huh?
Oh my God. I make it a rule not to participate in those auctions, but my wallet's got a hole burning in it right now, buddy. I'll tell you. I think for the Seals, it really comes down to goaltending. I don't think there's any 2 ways around it. That's been kind of their Achilles heel for the entire season. And it's been a little less rocky of late, but there's still been stretches where it's like, we got to pull Frank Shigliano out and stick in O'Rig, even if it's just for a minute and he doesn't face a shot, just so that Frank can get his head on right. In the last game, they need him to be consistent. And if he's not going to be consistent, then I really think they need to start tinkering with a, call it what you want, relief goaltender, where if Frank's good for 2.5 quarters, and then it's like you think the wheels are starting to wobble a little bit like they have throughout the season, pull him, stick in O'Rig, and let him prove, like, there's not been a solution so far this season regarding their goaltending. It's just the only consistency is how inconsistent it's been. So if they can get any semblance of that, and if they have to manufacture it by going through a relief system, whatever, they need to start, I think, tinkering with that now. It'd be nice if they could beat the Bandits, but this is an opponent you're not seeing until potentially NLL Finals matchup. So I really wouldn't worry too much about that. I think this is actually a game where they can kind of tinker around with that stuff and not really lose too much in the process. Like, it's better to figure it out now against a team as dangerous as the Bandits that you're probably going to see if you make it all the way to the finals than it is to do it against an opponent, a conference opponent, when it's like, no, this is a game we've got to win. There's no other way around it.
All right, next up on Saturday night, we have the Colorado Mammoth, the 6-6 Mammoth, taking on the 3-10 Vancouver Warriors at Rogers Arena. That's at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. And the Mammoth last weekend, in a rematch of last season's finals, earned a massive win that they absolutely needed. Do you see that game last weekend in Week 16? Do you see that as a statement game for Colorado, given the way their season has gone so far?
Oh yeah, 1,000,000%, man. Like, I don't know how any team that beats the Bandits at this point isn't taking that as a statement win. Like, that's a damn good team, and you held them to single digits. Not only it's like you went blow for blow with them for most of the game, and then when you needed to step on the throat, you did it emphatically. It was a great game for Dylan Ward, who was phenomenal between the pipes. It's great for the offense having Ryan Lee back in the lineup. Brad Challoner, our buddy Brad Challoner, had a fun nugget where it's like they're like 13 goals forward per game when Ryan Lee's in the lineup, which small sample size, 2 games, but 9 something with him out of the lineup. That offense needs him in there. He stirs that entire drink and the entire fortunes of the team, which is what we saw. Like, that's a team that you've proven you can handle. Doesn't matter if it's regular season, doesn't matter if it's playoffs. That's what you need. That's the confidence you need. And not only that, it put them back in 4th. They're a game ahead of the Saskatchewan Rush now in the standings for that. They control their own destiny moving forward. Like, that's what they want. It's not about how hot you are the entire time. It's when you get hot. And this is the perfect time for the Mammoth to get hot, finish the season on a strong note, and then make some noise in the playoffs, just like last season.
Yeah, I'm quietly hoping that the Mammoth make it into the postseason, because the NLL is a better place when the Colorado Mammoth are in the playoffs. All right, the final game of the weekend goes Saturday evening. Rochester, the 9-4 Nighthawks, head on down to Vegas to take on the 4-8 Desert Dogs. That's a 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Eastern at the Michelob Ultra Arena. And emotions are just all over the place in my eyes here when it comes to the Nighthawks after the 19-goal performance from Week 15 where they almost lost to Georgia, and then losing the heartbreaker last weekend in overtime versus Philly. Now, this is just their second game this season against an opponent from the West. What kind of problems does a team like Vegas provide to Rochester?
There's a polite way to probably say this, and I don't know what it is. None. Vegas was one of the teams that sold at the trade deadline, and like sold in air quotes. But they did ship one of their better defenders, and McIntosh, over to the Colorado Mammoth. I think they'll be fine. And like, at a certain point, you have to be realistic about your playoff expectations in an expansion season. But they've been really struggling of late. The offense has just not been good. It's single digits the last 2 games. And their defense, Landon Kels, has been, honestly, I think he should be in the running for Rookie of the Year. Just with what he's been able to do between the pipes. He's been very surprising, especially how he's continued to develop throughout the season. But at a certain point, they started regressing hard, and I think they're in the middle of that right now. Losing McIntosh's defensive prowess, as well as that veteran leadership that he brings to the team, that's kind of tough. And when you have a team like the Nighthawks, who, yeah, they may have surprised everybody to start the season off, but now nobody should be surprised when they play them. That's a damn good team. Their offense, when they are firing on all cylinders, can put up 19 easy. That defense, they held Philly. I know Philly ended up winning that game, but like, that was my favorite game of the year by far. I'm all for clean 9-8 OT, no penalties in a game, fun. And that's exactly what they did. They went out there. Rylan Hartley made plenty of saves. That even strength defense was out of their mind. Like, there's not a lot of weaknesses on that team. I think the one area that Vegas can kind of surprise them on, both of these teams are kind of sloppy when it comes to transitioning from their defensive end to their offensive end. They have a lot of kind of failed clears in that regard. I think they're top 2 or 3. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but that's kind of one of those areas where it's like, if you make that kind of mistake with Vegas, they love pouncing on that and pushing in transition with the likes of Jacob Rouet and Connor Kurse, John Wagner. Like, you don't want to give them those opportunities. But even if Rochester does hand out those opportunities to the Desert Dogs, I still think it's going to be a long night for the NLL's newest club.
Ty, thank you very much for going. That's a lot of games. That's a lot of questions, man.
One take.
One take, baby. That's what we're all about here at the NLL Flash. Well, seriously, thank you again so much for making time for us. You can catch all of Ty's work on Lacrosse Flash. And seriously, you guys got to take a look if you haven't at these deep dive stats that he does, because oh my God, it gives me a headache just reading it. The amount of work that he puts into it is ridiculous. Ty, good luck with your projects the rest of the season, and hopefully we can chat soon before we get going here into the postseason.
Neat, dude. Appreciate it.
A huge thank you once again to Ty Merrow of Lacrosse Flash for joining me for this episode, going through each and every game. Like I mentioned before, that was a lot of questions, a lot of games, and Ty is always an unreal source to go through pretty much every detail in the National Lacrosse League. And you can catch all of his latest editions of Flash stats on the Lacrosse Flash website. So go check those out. He puts a ton of work into those, and yeah, there's a lot of really quality information in there. So buckle up, because you're not going to want to miss one of those. So thanks to Ty, and that'll do it here for us at the NLL Flash. So thank you guys so much for joining us for another episode here. I've been Tino Fera, and for the entire team here at Lacrosse Flash, we'll see you next time.